What happens? When you marry someone you do not truly love, imagine a wedding day. Everything is perfectly arranged. Beautiful flowers, soft lighting, guests smiling, applauding at the right moments, as if everyone is watching the opening scene of a fairy tale. The vows are spoken clearly, smoothly, almost as if they were rehearsed in advance. From the outside, this is the moment people call happiness, but look a little closer, not at the smile on the face of the person standing at the altar, but at the eyes behind that smile, because there is a very particular kind of silence that exists inside the mind of someone about to marry a person they do not truly love. And it is not peace. It is not a sense of reassurance. It is suppression. It is the moment when reason is trying to drown out something very real inside. We grow up with a familiar story. You fall in love, then you get married, then happiness follows. And if you are lucky enough, everything will be fine. But in reality, for many people, marriage has never begun with love. It begins with stability, with a sense of safety, with time pressure, with the fear of being left behind. When choosing someone who looks reasonable on paper, the fear of being alone can sometimes weigh more heavily than the fear of not being loved. And here is the tragedy. From the outside, it looks like you have arrived at your destination, but on the inside, it feels as if you are slowly disappearing. So what really happens when someone enters marriage with a person they do not love, not to judge, only to look deeper and understand more clearly? A silence that very few people dare to speak about. There is a belief that most of us grow up with that marriage is the natural outcome of love. Love deeply enough, and you marry, and happiness will come. But if you look calmly at history, you will see that marriage has never started as a romantic story. For most of human history, marriage was a survival agreement, a way to secure land, protection, lineage, and a partner to carry the weight of life together. Love, if it appeared at all, often came later, or sometimes not at all. The idea that every marriage must begin with intense emotion is actually a very recent expectation, one that emerged only when life became safe enough, long enough, and when people gained the freedom to place personal feelings first. But there is one thing that has not changed as much as we might think: the human nervous system. Inside every person exists a very ancient instinct that asks a simple question: is this safe, rather than, does this make me feel alive? And when life becomes unstable, when time feels as though it is moving faster, when social pressure grows heavier, that instinct often wins. So not everyone who marries without love is weak, shallow, or unaware of themselves. Many people are simply doing what their body and nervous system believe is necessary to survive. They choose stability over emotion, certainty over the unknown, a relationship that does not make them anxious over one that might hurt them. Seen this way, this is not a story of right or wrong. It is a story of how human beings respond to fear, pressure, and the desire for safety. And if you have ever been in this position, it does not mean that you are inadequate. It only shows that you are trying to protect yourself in the way you knew how at that time. There is a very real, very ordinary reason why many people gradually drift away from their emotions without realizing it. It is the fear of being alone, not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet feeling that follows you year after year. When you begin to see friends gradually settle down, get married, and have children. When family gatherings start to include familiar questions. When age is no longer a meaningless number, but becomes a silent reminder that time is no longer on your side. No one says it out loud, but everyone can feel an invisible clock ticking somewhere in their mind. And the louder that clock becomes, the more people change the way they choose. When you are younger, the question is, who do I love? Who do I feel drawn to? But at some point, the question shifts very subtly, very quietly into who is suitable to build a life with, who is stable, who carries less risk. You begin to see relationships as problems to be solved, rather than emotions to be felt. Will the family approve? Is the job stable? Is the future clear? And in that process, emotion gets pushed to the background not because it is unimportant, but because it is difficult to control. When fear grows large enough, the brain stops searching for happiness and starts searching for escape. It no longer asks what makes you feel alive. It asks what keeps you from being alone. And so safety begins to look like love. Consistent presence begins to look like connection. Certainty begins to look like peace. Many people do not realize they are trading away emotion until they are already deeply inside a choice they believed was reasonable. No one consciously says, "I do not need love." They simply learn, little by little, to fall silent in the face of their own emotions, in exchange for the feeling of not being left behind. And if you see yourself somewhere in this story, understand one thing: you are not wrong. You're simply responding in a very human way to a fear that everyone touches at some point, only not everyone dares to look directly at it. There is a moment in many relationships that is very hard to name, the moment when your mind says, "This is fine," but your body does not feel that way at all. You do not hate the other person. You also do not have a clear reason to leave. Everything on the surface makes sense, but at a deeper level, your body does not open. It does not feel moved. It does not truly relax. And this is not because you are demanding or ungrateful. Very often, it comes from the way we learn to love early in life. Some people grow up with the feeling that love always comes with anxiety. You have to try. You have to hold on. You have to fear losing. For them, love is never calm. So when they grow up, they do not look for emotion, they look for certainty. Someone consistent, predictable, who does not disappear. Not because they deeply desire that person, but because their nervous system exhales and says, "This person will not leave me." That sense of relief is very easily mistaken for love. On the other hand, some people grow up in environments where emotional closeness was always paired with danger, control, harm, being consumed. For them, being fully seen, being touched deeply inside, is not romantic. It is frightening. So they unconsciously choose relationships that are just enough, close enough not to be lonely, but distant enough not to have to open completely. A muted connection becomes a safe zone. And then there is something very important that few people notice. For those who grew up in chaos, stability is not just a preference, it feels like salvation. A kind person, no drama, no emotional highs, no racing heart, may not make them fall in love, but it makes them feel able to survive. Meanwhile, for those who fear intimacy, distance takes the shape of freedom. No demands. No one touches their vulnerable places. No need to expose their true self. Neither is wrong. But here is the issue. The body always remembers. No matter how well the mind explains things away, the body keeps the receipt. It knows when you're trying to like someone instead of truly wanting them. It knows when what feels like peace is actually numbness. And that is when conflict begins, not between you and the other person, but between your present and your inner past. Because some decisions look like they are being made today, but were actually signed a long time ago by old experiences, old deficits, and old ways of loving that you once thought were normal. Understanding this is not about blaming yourself. It is about, for the first time, looking at your choices with kindness instead of asking why you are the way you are. There is something very subtle about settling. It rarely appears as a clear decision. It does not arrive with a sense of failure or despair. Most of the time, it arrives in the form of reasonableness. And because it feels reasonable, it is very hard to recognize. What follows are not signs to condemn yourself, but gentle observations so that, if needed, you can reflect honestly. The first sign is that relief outweighs excitement. You do not feel eager when you think about them. You simply feel reassured that you are not alone. The second sign is that your body begins to avoid closeness, not out of dislike, but because intimacy starts to feel like an obligation. The hug no longer feels natural. Touch becomes something to complete rather than something you desire. The third sign is that you feel lighter when you're not with them, not because you hate them, but because your nervous system can finally breathe. The fourth sign is that you're not truly yourself in the relationship. Your real thoughts, deep fears, slightly foolish dreams, spontaneous words, you keep them to yourself, not because the other person is bad, but because you do not feel safe enough to open up. The fifth sign is that when you think about the future, you do not feel distressed, but you also do not see light. Everything is stable, clear, reasonable, yet emotionally grey. There is nothing to look forward to except things continuing as they are. The sixth sign is that the relationship functions very well on a practical level. Who pays for what? Who does which tasks? Schedules? Responsibilities? Everything is clear and efficient. Everything runs smoothly. accept the connection. And the final sign is that you often imagine another version of yourself. Not necessarily another person, but another you. A you that feels more alive, lighter, more real. If you see yourself somewhere in these signs, please hear this clearly. It does not say anything bad about you. It does not mean you are ungrateful, weak, or that you made the wrong choice from the start. It simply means that inside you, there is a part trying to speak the truth in a very quiet way. And the most important thing here is not judgment, but creating enough safety to be honest with yourself for the first time in a very long time. After the wedding is over, after the photos are posted, after the congratulations have all been spoken, another dialogue begins quieter, more uncomfortable, not with the person you married, but with yourself, inside you. Two parallel truths coexist. One is the promise, the vows, the responsibilities, the roles. The other is the emptiness that appears whenever intimacy occurs. The mind hates holding two contradictions at the same time, so it begins to soothe itself. You tell yourself that passion always fades, that real love is duty, that everyone ends up like this. And for a while, that story seems reasonable, but the body does not listen to explanations. It responds with very small signals, a slight tightness in the chest, irritation without a clear reason, a faint sadness, even when nothing has happened. This is the hardest kind of loneliness to name. You're not alone. Someone lies beside you every night, yet you still feel as if no one truly reaches you, not reaching with hands, but reaching the real person inside. And when this state lasts long enough, the nervous system adapts in one of two ways. Some people develop a low-grade anxiety. They become easily irritated, easily tired, and their minds are constantly busy. They do not sleep deeply. They never truly relax. Others go in the opposite direction. They gradually shut down emotionally. Not intensely sad, but not joyful either. They still work, still take care of the family, still smile when needed, but inside, everything is flat. This is functional numbness. You are still living, but no longer feel alive. And when a very basic human need is not met, the need to connect, to be seen, to be emotionally touched, the brain looks for other ways to compensate. Work becomes a refuge because there you feel valuable. Children become the emotional center, not only out of love, but because you need someone to need you. Imagination grows stronger, other scenarios, other lives where you can be yourself, and sometimes very small things become supports. Shopping, alcohol, stimulating content, not to self-destruct, but to feel something move again inside. If you are in this state, listen carefully. You are not weak. You're not broken. You're emotionally hungry in a place that was meant to nourish you. And recognizing that is not the beginning of a tragedy. It is the first moment you stop blaming yourself and begin to understand how much effort it has taken just to survive. Then there will come a moment, whether you want it or not, when a marriage without connection brings you to a crossroads. Not in moments of drama, not in explosive arguments, but usually in very ordinary moments. A quiet evening, an empty look, a fatigue you cannot explain, at that crossroads. There are usually three outcomes. The first outcome is that the two of you become companions. The fire is gone, but kindness, respect, and goodwill remain. You build a stable life based on responsibility and cooperation. For some people, that is enough. The second outcome is a silent hell. Resentment goes unspoken and accumulates into contempt. Very small things become unbearable. The atmosphere at home grows thick, safety turns into a prison, and when respect disappears, everything begins to rot from the inside. The third outcome is parallel lives. No arguments, no separation, but no real meetings either. Two separate worlds under one roof. Less talking, less touching, less care. This is the quietest tragedy, because it can last for a very long time without ever being named. And at the center of all these outcomes, there is something more important than love, respect. You can live in a relationship without passion, but it is very hard to live in one where you're no longer seen as a whole human being. Once you see clearly where you stand, there are really only two paths. The first is to stay and rebuild if there is still a foundation of kindness, safety, and goodwill. To begin again with honest speech, real listening, and sometimes with support from the outside. The second path is to leave with dignity, not to run away, not to destroy, but to prepare, to take responsibility, and to allow yourself to grieve. Because sometimes maturity is not about enduring more, it is about being honest enough not to disappear from your own life.